Day 57. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. And then, something new surfaces, quiet, but deeply unsettling. An anonymous account sends a message to TMZ, claiming they know exactly who is responsible. They don't claim to be the kidnapper. At least, not directly. Instead, they position themselves as someone with inside knowledge. Someone who knows the name, the identity, the answer investigators have been searching for. But the price they demand raises immediate questions. 1 Bitcoin, roughly $70,000, in exchange for that name. The message reaches the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It is reviewed, analyzed, and then nothing. No public response. No confirmation. No denial. And that silence is the real story. Because in a case where every detail has been scrutinized, where every update has been followed closely, silence isn't empty, it's intentional. A signal that something may be happening behind the scenes that the public isn't meant to see. And that's where this video begins. The Bitcoin account tied to the original ransom demand in the Nancy Guthrie case isn't invisible, it's traceable. Blockchain forensic firms have confirmed it publicly. Every transaction in and out of that wallet exists on a permanent, public ledger. The address is real. And behind that address, at least in theory, is a real identity. So the question isn't just who took her anymore. The real question is this: if that wallet can be traced, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation has had the tools to do exactly that from the very beginning, why, after 57 days, has no one been charged? That's the question this video is built around. Because whatever that account reveals could redefine where this investigation actually stands. Stay with me. But before we get into the wallet, you need the timeline. On the night of January 31st, Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother of Savannah Guthrie, was dropped off at her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson after dinner with her daughter Annie and son-in-law. They left around 9:50 p.m. That was the last confirmed sighting. By the next morning, February 1st, she was gone. She didn't show up for church. And the timeline that seemed ordinary just hours earlier had already begun to fracture into something far more serious. Her family went to check on Nancy Guthrie the next morning, and what they found immediately changed the tone of everything. Her phone was still there. Her wallet untouched. Her daily heart medication, essential for someone with a serious heart condition and a pacemaker, left behind. The one thing missing was her. And then, the detail that confirmed this wasn't a normal disappearance. Blood on the front porch. Her doorbell camera had been deliberately disconnected and removed. This wasn't random. This was methodical. Chris Nanos stated it publicly. He believed she had been abducted. Within days, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined through its Phoenix field office, alongside federal prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona. The scene itself told a clear story. This was targeted. When investigators recovered surveillance from her Nest camera, pulled from backup servers because there was no active subscription, it revealed something even more chilling. In the early hours of February 1st, a masked man stood at her front door. Around 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, average build, carrying a firearm holstered at his waist. On his back, a black 25L Ozark Trail backpack. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He worked. Using what appeared to be a plant from the porch, he covered the camera lens. A small flashlight clenched in his mouth as he moved. Controlled. Intentional. Someone who knew exactly what he was doing. And then, just days later, the next phase began. Ransom notes started arriving, local outlets, national media, including TMZ. The demand, millions in Bitcoin. This wasn't just a crime. It was a plan already in motion. The first ransom note revealed something investigators couldn't ignore. It contained details about Nancy Guthrie's home that had never been made public. The position of an Apple Watch. A broken floodlight. This wasn't guesswork. Someone knew the inside of that house. Authorities took it seriously. Deadlines were set. February 5th, then February 9th. Both came and went with no proof of life, no contact, nothing. The family went public. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings pleaded for answers, offering to pay, asking for any sign she was alive. None came. Investigators cleared the family. A man named Derek Kella was arrested for fake ransom messages. Another local man was questioned and released. And still, nothing. Day 57. No suspect named. No arrest made. A $100,000 reward from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and $1 million from the family. That's where most stories stop. But this one doesn't, because the real question isn't just what happened. It's what happened inside a Bitcoin account everyone assumed couldn't be traced. And that assumption may be the biggest mistake of all. That assumption, that Bitcoin is truly anonymous, isn't just wrong. In the case of Nancy Guthrie, it could be the key to everything. Every Bitcoin transaction is recorded on the blockchain. A public, permanent ledger. The wallet address from the ransom note sent to KOLD News 13 is visible to anyone. Every movement in and out, every timestamp, every amount, it's all there, unchangeable, impossible to erase. But here's the catch. The ledger shows activity, not identity. A wallet address is like a bank account number with no name attached. You can see what it does, but not who owns it. That's where blockchain forensics changes the game. Firms like Chainalysis and Crystal Intelligence specialize in connecting those anonymous-looking addresses to real people. By tracking how funds move, identifying exchanges, and using legal subpoenas to access KYC data, names, addresses, IDs, they can turn digital traces into real-world identities. And as Ethan Raviv pointed out, even a single payment into that wallet could be enough to start unraveling who's behind it. The moment a wallet address appears, investigators have something actionable. That was the point made by Ethan Raviv, and in the case of Nancy Guthrie, that moment came early. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has had that wallet address since at least February 3rd. They have the tools. The Phoenix Field Office. Federal prosecutors. The full weight of agencies that have successfully tracked and seized crypto assets before. And yet, no arrest. No name. No explanation. Because there's a second possibility. If that wallet is non-custodial, created through platforms like MetaMask, then there is no exchange, no KYC data, no easy path to an identity. The transactions are visible, but the owner stays hidden unless they slip up somewhere else in the chain. And criminals who understand this don't rely on one layer of protection. They use chain hopping, moving funds across wallets and currencies. They use mixing services, blending transactions into noise. The FBI knows all of this. They've built cases on it before. Which leaves one critical question. Is this a wallet that leads directly to a name, and investigators simply aren't ready to reveal it? Or is it a wallet designed so well that, so far, it leads nowhere at all? Right now, the answer is sitting behind the same thing that has defined this case from the start: silence. What we do know is this. On February 10th, the same day the Federal Bureau of Investigation released new surveillance footage, something moved inside the Bitcoin wallet tied to the Nancy Guthrie case. Around 5 p.m. Arizona time, a transaction hit the address listed in the ransom note. Confirmed by Arizona's family. Confirmed by TMZ. Even Harvey Levin acknowledged a payment had been made, though the amount was never disclosed. And then, nothing. No comment from the FBI. No explanation from the family. Which leaves three possibilities. The family paid, the FBI triggered the wallet as a trap, or someone else, completely unknown, sent the money. None of these have been confirmed. That transaction happened 57 days ago. Whatever it revealed, if it revealed anything, has never been made public. But 2 days later, the case took another turn. On February 12th, a new email reached TMZ. Different sender. Different Bitcoin wallet. And this time, the demand wasn't millions. It was one Bitcoin, about $70,000, in exchange not for her return, but for a name. This was not a ransom demand for Nancy Guthrie's return. Instead, an unexpected email arrived requesting payment in exchange for revealing the kidnapper's identity. Read that again. Not a proof of life, not a ransom, just money to name the person responsible. TMZ immediately forwarded the email to the FBI, but the FBI did not deposit any funds, and according to reports, no transaction ever occurred. The next morning, February 13th, a second email from the same sender appeared. They complained they were not being taken seriously and claimed the situation had changed overnight. They stated that after revealing the name, they would need money to lay low, fearing retaliation. They also expressed concern about being implicated, much like Carlos, the delivery man who had been briefly detained and released. Here's the key detail: this was not a random bystander. The sender knew the kidnapper, feared consequences from that person, and worried about being connected to the crime. This is the profile of someone inside the situation, not a casual witness. And one more thing that barely got coverage. According to NewsNation and TMZ, the writing style of the second and third emails matched the original ransom note exactly, consistent across all four communications, as multiple analysts have pointed out. If you're following this story, subscribe and turn on notifications now, because this detail is the key that unlocks the rest of this case. Same voice, different wallet, different demand. Someone who may have taken Nancy Guthrie, or someone standing right beside them, sent a message offering to sell the name, their own identity, or a partner's, all for $70,000. The FBI has that email. They analyzed the writing and noticed stylistic similarities to previous communications, but they have said nothing about who sent it, whether it's authentic, or what, if anything, they did with the information. Day 12 of the investigation: a Bitcoin wallet, an email, a name for sale, and silence from the people who received it. Most coverage shifted to the next press conference, the next tip line update, or the next emotional video from the Guthrie family. Almost no one paused to report what happened at FBI headquarters on February 10th. Not just what was released, but how it was released, and what effect that choice may have had on the investigation happening 4 states away in Tucson. FBI Director Kash Patel posted the surveillance video of the suspect on his personal account, not the FBI's official account, not through the Phoenix field office, not in coordination with the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Investigators on the ground in Tucson did not know it was coming, and the ripple of that decision may have quietly shifted the investigation in ways almost no one outside those walls will ever know. Every detail matters. Every decision changes the story. If you're following this case, watch closely, because the next revelation could flip everything we think we know. CNN reported that the local FBI team was caught completely off guard. It would have been nice to know what headquarters was planning to release, a law enforcement source said. They learned about the post the same way the public did. One of the images Patel posted, according to CNN, was not from the night of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Tucson investigators believed it came from a different date and were puzzled. The FBI never clarified, and the image remained public. By then, the FBI had received 18,000 tip line calls since February 1st, for thousands of them in the 24 hours after the video was released. People across the country were scrutinizing the images, calling in sightings that may have been unrelated to the abduction. On February 10th, 3 key events happened at once. The Bitcoin wallet recorded its first transaction. Carlos, a local man, was detained and released the next day, and the tip lines were flooded with calls from people seeing the suspect's image for the first time. Every call, accurate or not, may have quietly shifted the investigation in Tucson without the public knowing. 3 separate events unfolded within a single 24-hour window, and whether they are connected is something investigators have not addressed publicly. What forensic work has produced so far, and what it has not, is revealing. 16 gloves were collected from around Nancy Guthrie's home. Most were dismissed as irrelevant, but one, found in roadside brush about 2 miles away, carried DNA from an unknown male. The Pima County Sheriff's Department sent it to a lab, entered the profile into the FBI's National DNA Database, and the result matched a local restaurant worker who had no connection to the case. Other DNA evidence remains under analysis, with no further updates provided. NY's Nest doorbell camera presented its own challenges. Without an active subscription, footage was not automatically backed up, forcing the FBI to retrieve it from backup servers, a slow process that cost precious investigation time. What they recovered showed the masked suspect clearly enough to describe his build, clothing, and backpack, but not his face. Cameras covering the pool, backyard, and side yard captured only thumbnails of people in the yard before the abduction, none appearing suspicious. Meanwhile, in the weeks before Nancy disappeared, a nearby property in the Catalina foothills had been vacated, and several homes were under construction. In weeks 7 and 8 of the investigation, FBI agents returned to the neighborhood specifically to question residents about those properties, probing details that might hold a key to what really happened. The FBI requested the names of contractors and workers who had been active in the Catalina foothills in the days and weeks leading up to January 31st, as reported by NewsNation correspondent Brian Enton. The Phoenix field office, as is standard, declined to comment on specifics of an ongoing investigation, but the implication is clear. Someone may have been in that neighborhood long enough, and often enough, to know Nancy Guthrie's routine, when she came home, which light above her door was broken, where she kept her Apple Watch. This was not a crime of opportunity. Sheriff Nanos confirmed publicly that the home was targeted and the abduction planned. The unanswered question is how long that planning took, and whether any of the contractors or workers whose names the FBI is now collecting were in a position to observe the house weeks before January 31st. The family's March 22 statement asked the Tucson community to focus on two specific time frames: January 31st into the early morning of February 1st, and the late evening of January 11th, 3 weeks prior. Surveillance footage from January 11th shows a masked figure at Nancy's door, the same figure, or someone dressed identically, appearing at the property weeks before she was taken. Whoever this person was, they came twice. The first time, nothing happened. The second time, Nancy was gone. That pattern, reconnaissance followed by execution, is consistent with a planned, targeted abduction by someone who understood the risks and prepared for them, not an impulsive act or random crime. The FBI knows this, the sheriff knows this, and according to a former FBI special agent who spoke to Newsweek in Week 8, the investigation is red-hot behind the scenes. So why, with a traceable Bitcoin wallet, a distinctive backpack, DNA evidence, construction records, contractor names, and footage from 2 separate visits to the property, is the public still left with so many unanswered questions? Why has no one been arrested? There are multiple answers, and at least 2 are deeply uncomfortable. The first is straightforward. The FBI has strong leads, but not yet probable cause. Forensic evidence is still being processed, the blockchain trail is being followed, and an arrest is likely closer than the public silence suggests. That is the version the sheriff's office would prefer the public to believe. The second is far more complicated. The Kash Patel situation, the unauthorized release of images, the possible inclusion of footage from the wrong date, and the surprise to the local team raise a question no official channel has answered. If headquarters released information that confused the tip line and that misinformation was never corrected, did it set the investigation back? And if so, by how much? There is a third complication that has received almost no coverage. The ransom notes themselves, considered credible enough to be analyzed carefully, were never fully released publicly, because law enforcement feared copycat letters could corrupt the authentic communications. That decision was deliberate, yet multiple notes were leaked anyway, published by TMZ, Cole, Cohen, and others. The writing style became public knowledge, giving anyone the ability to craft fake notes that sounded real. According to polygraph expert Lisa Ribikoff Mooney, releasing the letters allows copycats to replicate the language, tone, and even font of the authentic ones, removing the ability to use the originals as verification tools. This is the situation the investigation now faces. Authentic communications cannot be cleanly separated from fraudulent ones without additional corroborating evidence. Meanwhile, the one person who offered to identify the kidnapper in exchange for 1 Bitcoin has not been paid and has not been publicly heard from since February 13th, leaving a tantalizing thread that may hold crucial answers yet remains untouched. The FBI has the writing, the wallet address, the stylistic analysis, and the silence of someone who claimed they feared retaliation. If you've been following this case and wondering why the investigation seems to be moving in slow motion despite all that evidence, drop a comment below. Share your thoughts on the true motive, not ransom. If this abduction was planned weeks in advance by someone who knew every detail of Nancy Guthrie's home and routine, what were they really after? We read every comment, and this case deserves that conversation. Because the deepest layer of this investigation is not the Bitcoin wallet, it is not the construction workers, and it is not even the writing style of the emails. It is a decision made at FBI headquarters on February 10th that blindsided the people running the investigation in Tucson, and the ripple effect of that decision may have altered everything that followed. Day 55, and Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The question that links her son-in-law's name to the title of this video, what the cell phone records from that night actually show, has not been answered on camera by anyone. Not the Pima County Sheriff's Department, not the FBI, and not the dozens of outlets covering the story every day for nearly 2 months. This video will ask it directly. Sheriff Chris Nanos appeared on NBC's Today Show on March 4th and confirmed that investigators are focused on a critical missing piece of evidence, the suspect's cell phone. He did not say whose phone. That piece alone could change everything we think we know. He did not explain what the data shows, or what it does not. 57 days in, no arrest, no proof of life. The family is offering a $1 million reward for information, and the FBI tip line has received over 1,500 leads since the announcement, none of which have cracked the case. This video is not about Tommaso being responsible for what happened to his mother-in-law. He is not a suspect. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed on February 16th that the entire Guthrie family, including all spouses, had been officially cleared. What this video is about is a forensic question, a very specific one. On the night of January 31st, between roughly 9:50 p.m. and 1:47 a.m., how many devices were active within range of Nancy Guthrie's home? Whose phones were pinging cell towers in the Catalina foothills during that 4-hour window, and whose went dark? A phone that powers off during a critical period is not invisible. It is a data point. In digital forensics, it's called a bookend, and that logic is not theoretical. It's how FBI analysts placed Brian Koberger at the scene of 4 murders in Moscow, Idaho. His phone was off during the exact window of the killings. That silence spoke louder than any call log could. Digital forensics expert Heather Barnhart, who worked the Koberger case, put it plainly, the loudest evidence can be the absence of evidence. The FBI is applying the same framework in this case, pulling tower records and mapping device locations, searching for the invisible threads that may finally illuminate what happened that night. Investigators are tracking proximity pings, moments when a phone nears a Wi-Fi network without actually connecting, moments that still leave traces in a log somewhere. The question is not whether this data exists, it does. The question is what it shows. And why, 55 days into a high-profile federal investigation with national media attention, no one has publicly explained it. If you're watching from southern Arizona, especially anywhere near the Catalina foothills or the broader Tucson area, stay until the end. The FBI tip line is 1-800 CLLI. A detail that seems minor to you could be exactly what they are still waiting for. Here's what you need to know to follow the rest of this story. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old and lives alone in the quiet Catalina foothills, just north of Tucson. She is Savannah Guthrie's mother, co-host of NBC's Today Show, and she has significant mobility limitations, takes daily heart medication, and has a pacemaker. On January 31st, at 5:32 p.m., Nancy took an Uber to the nearby home of her daughter Annie Guthrie and Annie's husband, Tommaso Sion, for dinner. Sion, a science teacher in Tucson since 2006, was among the family members closest to Nancy, close enough, as Savannah would later describe, to be there for her mother every single day. Around 9:50 p.m., Sion drove Nancy home in his blue Honda CR-V, confirmed she walked safely inside, and left. Her phone remained in the house. Her wallet stayed in the house. Her medication stayed in the house. Her car sat untouched in the driveway. Every object she would need to survive the next 24 hours remained inside those walls. The following morning, Nancy did not show up for her regular virtual church service, and that simple absence would mark the beginning of a mystery that has gripped Tucson, the nation, and investigators alike. A member of Nancy Guthrie's congregation noticed her absence and reached out to the family. Relatives arrived at her home around 11 a.m. to find the back doors propped open and Nancy nowhere in sight. The family called 911 just before noon. Deputies discovered bloodstains near the front entrance. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Nancy. Her residence was immediately treated as a crime scene. Sheriff Chris Nanos stated publicly that he believed she had been taken against her will. Homicide investigators joined the case, and the FBI was on the ground within days. On February 10th, FBI Director Kash Patel released 4 surveillance images showing a masked, armed individual outside Nancy's front door in the early morning hours of February 1st. The person wore gloves, long sleeves, and carried a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. They approached the doorbell camera, attempted to remove it, failed, and then covered the lens with foliage from a potted plant on Nancy's porch. At least 2 ransom notes demanding cryptocurrency have been received by the family, and both deadlines passed with no public explanation, no identified suspect, and no arrest. As of day 55, Nancy Guthrie's location and condition remain unknown. Most coverage stops at the image of the masked figure on her porch. But investigators moved beyond the photograph weeks ago. They are inside the data now, inside the cell towers, inside the phones, inside the 4-hour window between Cyan dropping Nancy home and the masked figure appearing at her door. That window is the focus of this video because it is where the digital record was being written minute by minute, whether anyone intended it or not. Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper made one critical mistake, one that most people do not know about. It is the same kind of mistake that has brought down ransomware criminals across 3 continents, and it may hold the key to everything. They used Bitcoin, not because it is untraceable. It isn't, at least not immediately or automatically. They used it because Bitcoin is the only major financial system in the world where every transaction is permanently recorded on a public ledger that anyone can access, and no one can alter. Forensics firms have spent years learning to read it. Cash disappears. Wire transfers can slip through jurisdictions with limited cooperation. Bitcoin, by design, leaves a permanent record. The wallet address in the original ransom note is still visible. Every transaction that has ever touched it can be seen. The FBI's forensic teams have had access to that address for 57 days. This case teaches something critical about targeted crimes. They do not begin on the day the victim disappears. They begin weeks earlier. The visit on January 11th, 3 weeks before the abduction, was reconnaissance. Someone approached Nancy Guthrie's front door with a mask, a weapon, and enough knowledge of her property to know which camera to cover and which light above the door was already broken. That level of preparation requires time, observation, and proximity. If you live near someone elderly who lives alone, this case is a reminder to check in, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Targeted crimes depend on the assumption that no one is watching. A neighbor who notices an unfamiliar vehicle parked near the same house 2 mornings in a row is not being paranoid. They may be the witness that breaks the case. Nancy did not have an active subscription on her Nest camera. The footage existed, but it required the FBI to retrieve it from backup servers, costing precious time. A cloud-connected home security system with an active recording subscription is not a luxury. It is evidence that exists from the moment something happens, not days later. Cold Case Files USA covers not just what happened, but how it was planned, how it was investigated, and what gaps in the system reveal about the risks faced by people like Nancy Guthrie. Day 57. A Bitcoin account tied to a name the FBI has not made public. An email from someone claiming to know exactly who it belongs to. An investigation described by insiders as red-hot, and yet no arrest. That gap between what investigators know and what they can prove is where this case stands today. Cold Case Files USA will follow every development, when the wallet is traced, when the name is revealed, when the investigation finally moves. Subscribe and turn on notifications, not as a favor to this channel, but because this case is far from over, and you will want to know the moment it does. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, call 1-800-CALL-FBI. The family is offering $1 million for any tip that leads to her recovery. One call, 30 seconds, could change everything. Cold Case Files USA follows every lead until there are no leads left. Somewhere tonight, someone knows that second name. The FBI believes they do too. The only question remaining: what happens the moment that name is finally revealed?